The 18 points earned at the Suzuka Circuit doubled the total Ferrari had collected in the previous 2 rounds of the 2025 Formula One season, in Melbourne and Shanghai. Charles Leclerc, in 4th, crossed the finish line ahead of the 2 Mercedes W16 cars, with a gap of 16 seconds to Max Verstappen after 53 laps. This was the slightly positive side of the weekend in the Japanese Grand Prix, but the overall result still fell far short of the Maranello team's objectives. After the events in China, it was necessary to bring home a more solid result, but combining Charles Leclerc's placement with Lewis Hamilton's 7th position was certainly no reason for celebration. The Monegasque driver described a two-sided reality. On one hand, the satisfaction of having completed a weekend where he was able to extract everything from the car. On the other, the awareness that even extracting everything was not enough to reach the podium. The question mark remained over where to look for the missing performance. According to Team Principal Frederic Vasseur, the race to bring upgrades is not a priority over gaining a deeper understanding of the car, a policy that paid off last year, provided the Maranello team identified the areas where the car was lacking. On this front, Charles Leclerc's remarks seemed less convinced, and it appeared that, for him, what was seen at Suzuka is all the car can currently offer. In his role, Charles Leclerc emerged from the Japanese round in a good light. His strong qualifying lap on Saturday served as a springboard that he made the most of to stay ahead of the Mercedes duo, a result that had not been guaranteed going into the Suzuka weekend. Ferrari chose to split strategies. The Monegasque driver started on medium tires, while his Maranello teammate began the race on the Pirelli hard tire, but the difference in performance was minimal, also due to a track that was surprisingly easy on tires thanks to the new track surface. Charles Leclerc said it had been a somewhat solitary race for him. He acknowledged that 4th place couldn't be a satisfying result, but pointed to the positives of the weekend, such as the work done on Friday on setup changes and the lessons learned, which would be useful in upcoming races. The 27-year-old believed progress had been made, but stressed the importance of staying focused and continuing to work without rushing decisions, especially because the top team still had a clear advantage in race pace. For now, he said, the team needed to concentrate on maximizing the points haul, something they managed to do on Sunday, an optimization that Lewis Hamilton this time missed. Qualifying proved decisive for the weekend's outcome, and the Briton, who started 8th, managed to gain only 1 position, overtaking Isaac Hadjar. The 7-time Formula One world champion admitted it had been a tough race and said they didn't have the pace to fight with the top 3, which was something the team would work hard on for the next races. He added that, on his part, he had chosen a setup that was generally good, but didn't provide the pace he would have needed on track. In reality, Lewis Hamilton didn't have the pace to fight even the other Mercedes, who finished 5th and 6th. On lap 32, after the pit stop, he was 7/10 behind Kimi Antonelli, and by the checkered flag the gap had grown to 11 seconds. Frederic Vasseur commented at the end of the weekend that the result mirrored what had been seen in qualifying. With the car they had, they probably couldn't have done more. The French manager acknowledged that they were struggling in some areas and needed to keep working to extract more performance from the car ahead of Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. He noted that they knew there was room for improvement and needed to focus on the car's balance and tire management. The Ferrari team principal explained that they had followed exactly the same approach last year. They had been 6/10 off the pace and managed to recover during the season, which meant they had to maintain the same mindset. The Frenchman pointed out that the gap and the current results didn't matter. What matters is doing a better job the following week to improve both the car's potential and their ability to extract that potential, including its operation and performance. The entire Japanese Grand Prix weekend was therefore clearly salvaged in some way by an excellent performance in both qualifying and the race by Charles Leclerc. The 4th place secured on Saturday allowed the Monegasque to then defend himself from George Russell, who was slightly faster with the Mercedes. Charles Leclerc also managed to pull away from the Englishman in the middle part of the race, showing that the overall gap between the two cars was still limited. Our calculations quantify it between 0.5 and 1/10 per lap in the second half of the race. Not much, but it is still a figure that inexorably places Ferrari as the 4th force in the field after 3 rounds of the 2025 Formula One championship. On the other hand, only Charles Leclerc was able to defend Ferrari's colors, while Lewis Hamilton had an absolutely lackluster weekend. Mercedes, on the contrary, raced not only with a strong George Russell, but with a Kimi Antonelli, who delivered a real show of talent with an incredible second stint, being the fastest driver on track, which even earned him the fastest lap. For Ferrari, it is also worth noting that the gap suffered by Charles Leclerc at the finish, 16 seconds, translates to a deficit of 0.3 per lap, but from Max Verstappen, not from McLaren, which, as mentioned, had at least 1 or 2 tenths more. That would quantify Ferrari's gap to the McLaren MCL 39 car at nearly half a second, a significant figure in a race where, unlike most of the times, tire management played no major role, and it was all about pushing. But beyond the performance itself, there is a growing inconsistency in the statements from the Italian side's 3 key figures: Frederic Vasseur, Lewis Hamilton, and Charles Leclerc. For instance, the Monegasque said he was happy to have finally understood this weekend how to set up the car effectively for his driving style, and thus to have been able to extract all that was available, expressing hope that the updates expected for the next race at the Bahrain International Circuit would bring more performance. Charles Leclerc didn't hide his disappointment either, openly stating that this weekend there was nothing more to be extracted from the SF-25, and that everything the car has to offer at the moment is what was seen in the race, at least from his side of the garage. On the other hand, the team principal stated that before thinking about updates, it is necessary to focus on achieving the right car balance, so as to use the full potential of the package. Lewis Hamilton instead spoke both of significant work needed to recover performance and of suboptimal ride heights and components on his car that are causing problems for reasons still unknown to the engineers, but which are hoped to be resolved next weekend at the Suzuka Circuit. The impression, from the outside, is that what Charles Leclerc said at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix, for example, might actually be true, namely that the SF-25 car, in its current configuration and setup, cannot perform better than what was seen in Japan at the 5.807-kilometer Suzuka Circuit. However, this includes the limitations to rear-end setups and ride heights that have already been widely discussed, and therefore, in order to find more competitiveness, a radical solution must first be identified, if possible, to this inherent flaw of the 2025 Ferrari F1 project. Thinking about it, the only hypothesis that would reconcile the statements recently made by Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Frederic Vasseur is that the three, starting from different perspectives, are actually talking about the same thing, and it is likely that next weekend we will find out. The characteristics of the Suzuka racing circuit, which completely limits the rear end, combined with the fact that the pre-season testing session was already conducted on this track just a few weeks ago, make the Bahrain Grand Prix a potentially decisive moment for Ferrari's 2025 Formula One season.